This is the type of video where you get all the books out, think you're pretty confident with your choices of what you're going to speak about, and then you remember that another book exists and you have a slight existential crisis. Hey everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be a tag video of sorts. I was tagged by the lovely Becca, whose channel I will link down below, to do the If I Could Only Keep 10 Books challenge video, something like that. But basically, pretty self-explanatory. You have to pick which 10 books you would keep if you could only keep 10 books in your actual sort of physical library. Now obviously you do have the option of sort of going to a library or using like ebooks or Audible or anything like that. But what 10 books would you pick if you could physically only have 10? Now I've redone this list quite a few times because I kind of thought that maybe I want to pick one from each of my favourite authors, but then I've realised that there's some books that I'm like connected to more personally that aren't even necessarily from people that I would call my favourite authors, but maybe I just kind of read them at the right time, so maybe they should be considered. And yeah, it was a little bit of a hard choice. I'm like, it was more like emotionally which books would I like to keep and which ones am I okay with just having to borrow from the library whenever I want to read them. So I scoured my shelves, I picked 10 books. I think when Becca did hers, she actually put them in sort of the order of how important they were to her, so she ended with her most important. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start with the ones that you would probably expect me to pick, and then I'm going to go to the slightly more surprising ones at the end. So without further ado, let's start with the 10 books that I have picked if I could only keep 10 books. So the first one should come as no surprise to anybody who has watched my channel. I've mentioned many times that this is my comfort read. I read it whenever I'm just feeling a little bit down. I'm actually really in the mood to read this one at the minute, so that's saying something. But it is Red, White and Royal Blue by Katie McGuiston. I think I've read this book 5 times now. It's only been out for about 2 or 3 years, so I'm doing quite well with that. But yeah, this is, like I said, a comfort read for me, so I would feel very strange if I didn't have it on my shelves. For anyone who doesn't know, this tells the story of the son of the President of the United States and one of the princes of the UK, and it is about their sort of rivalry that develops into a romance. And it's fluffy, it's ridiculous, but I do love it. I just, like I said, I reread it whenever I just want to pick me up, so I would definitely need to keep this close by. Speaking of things to read whenever I want to pick me up, I would have to pick Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I have picked the first volume just because it's nice to sort of start getting to this world with the first book, although I will say that I think my favourite is actually volume 4, just because this one has some more sort of milestones in Nick and Charlie's relationship. But yeah, the first one definitely is just a nice comfort read. Again, this one tells the story of Nick and Charlie, who are 2 boys who meet in school. They're in the same form class together, and Charlie's out at school. Nick is still sort of figuring out his sexuality, and it's just about their friendship that develops into something more, and it's really cute. It's a graphic novel, so looks like that on the inside, and I really adore this series. Very much looking forward to the TV show of it, and I'm very terrified of what I'm going to do once volume 5 comes out and I have no more of these stories left to read. But yeah, I would need to keep this one around, definitely. Okay, so those 2 I definitely spoke about a lot on my channel. The next 2 are still ones that you can probably expect I'm going to pick, because I've mentioned that both of these are favourite authors quite a few times. So the first one being History Is All You Left Me by Adam Silvera. So this is my favourite Adam Silvera book. It's the first one of his that I read, actually, I think. Just trying to remember that. I may have read More Happy Than Not first, but I believe this one was the first one I read. About a boy called Griffin whose best friend and ex-boyfriend dies in a drowning accident, and it's told in 2 timelines. So it's told kind of before, when they were just getting together as a couple, sort of going from best friends to being in a relationship, leading up to their breakup, and it's told after Theo has died as well, and about kind of how Griffin's dealing with that, not necessarily in the most healthy of ways. And I really adore this book. I have mentioned recently, actually I'm due a reread of this soon because I've just got a nice special edition of it, but I would definitely need to keep this one. It is one of my all-time favourites. So I think that's one of the things with this, is that if I would like to reread the book, I would like to have it on my shelves, because when I reread, I would like to read my sort of original copies. So anything where I'm sort of desperate to reread it kind of needs to be in this video, really. And that leads quite well actually onto the next few, because all of these I want to reread soon. But the next one being Simon vs. Homo sapiens agenda by Becky Albertalli. So it's about Simon, who has a sort of online flirtation going on with this character called Blue. You don't know who Blue is, and Simon basically isn't out at school. The only person that he's out to is Blue, and he doesn't even know who he is. But then he ends up getting blackmailed, and someone finds his emails and threatens to sort of leak them to the entire school. And I really love this story. I really particularly love the film adaptation of this as well. Again, it's a comfort thing for me. Whenever I'm feeling a little bit low, I put the film on. Maybe that's what I should do soon if I don't get around to reading Red, White and Royal Blue. But yeah, I would like to keep this one because, again, just the comfort. I will also say that both History's All You Left Me and this one are signed by the authors. I met them at a joint signing that they did for What If It's Us. So another reason why I'd like to keep these is because they are sort of signed and personalised to me. So it's nice to have them in my collection. So the next one is one that I actually haven't spoke about too much on this channel, but it is possibly my favourite book of all time, so you know, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I love V.E. Schwab. I have 2 whole shelves dedicated to her up here, and I really love her writing style. And I spoke about a couple of her books on here because I've read a couple of them like in blogs and things like that, but I haven't really spoke too much about my love of Addie LaRue, but it is my favourite one of her books. I read it when it first came out. I've just picked this edition up because it's the first one I grabbed. This is the 1-year anniversary edition with the pretty stenciled edges, but I also have got the Illumicrate one up there as well. I would love to have had more copies, but I didn't foresee how much I would love this book when it first came out. So this tells the story of Addie, who is from France about 300 years ago, and it's a time when all she's kind of expected to do is grow up, get married, have kids, that type of life, and she wants more. She doesn't quite know what she wants, but she just wants more. So she ends up making a deal with a sort of devil type character, and what she asks for is more time, and he grants her that wish, but with the catch that every single person that meets Addie will forget her. If you turn your back on her, if you close the door, you forget that Addie exists. So she has this sort of endless existence, but without any sort of company, because nobody remembers she exists, until one day she meets somebody who does. And I adore this book. It's really beautifully written. I love how it jumps around to different timelines. I like that in a book. I like when you sort of see one large expanse of time just done little snippets of it. And I particularly love the character of Henry. He's a very relatable character for many reasons, and I love this book so much. And yeah, when I'm saying about wanting to reread things, I've been meaning to reread this for a year now, and I've actually just started reading V. Schwab's new book today, and already I'm loving the writing style of that, and it's making me want to pick this one back up again. So maybe this will happen soon, we will see. Sticking with a few now of ones that I have spoke about on my channel, but not massive amounts. I think, again, I have read other books by this author in a vlog. Definitely, actually, I think my first reading vlog was reading a book by this author, but I haven't spoke too much about this one, and this one's my favourite, and it is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. So Six of Crows is the first Leigh Bardugo book I read. I read Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, and then I went back and read the Shadow and Bone series, which I didn't love as much as Six of Crows. I don't think there's many people who prefer the Shadow and Bone series to Six of Crows, but there is something about this sort of ragtag bunch of criminals with whose hearts are in the right place who end up doing a heist, and I love them. I love them all so much. And yeah, there's not really much else to say. There's just something about kind of the humour in this, the friendships, the romantic relationships. Everything in this is fantastic. I love this book so much, and again, I really need to reread it because I think I've only read this series once. And also, again, the reason why I picked this particular copy is because I do have my original ones that I read the first time. So this is my collector's edition that I got signed and personalised when I went to meet Leigh Bardugo, and just became a really bumbling mess when I was trying to speak to her. But yeah, I really love this book, and I love, again, the adaptation. The TV show is fantastic. I do recommend you watch it. Just a random aside there, but yeah. Six of Crows had to be on this list, definitely. It was one of the first ones I thought of. Addie and Six of Crows were the first ones, so I'm like, well, I have to keep those. Another one that I've definitely mentioned, but maybe not massive amounts and maybe not for a while, is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. So I love John Green. I know that many people have kind of got over their John Green phase now. Not me. I will still read anything that he puts out. I'm a big fan of his work outside of his writing as well. I watch his YouTube channel with his brother Hank, and I love everything that they kind of create together, and I'm very excited because they had their charity fundraiser happening next weekend actually, which I take part in every single year. And yeah, the online community that has sort of built up around John and Hank, the Nerd Fighter community, has been very important in my life, and I think that is part of the reason why I love this book and why I would need to keep this book as well. So Turtles All the Way Down tells the story of Asa, and it is technically about this search for this fugitive billionaire and trying to track him down, and there's this mystery element to it. And when you read the synopsis, that's kind of what it's about. It's not about that. It's really not. It's about OCD. It's about Aza struggles with sort of obsessive thoughts, and the cover is actually sort of the spirals that happen in her head when she's obsessing over something, and it's quite a sort of unflinching look at OCD as well. There are some moments in this that, even if you're not an anxious person, can kind of really make you feel that anxiety. It's probably the closest I read to how an anxiety attack actually feels for me, which sounds weird that I would want to keep that, because why would I want to keep something that feels so like almost claustrophobic when I'm reading it? But I also just think it's handled really, really well. You can tell that it comes from a place of experience. John Green does have OCD himself. He's been quite vocal talking about that, and this definitely draws on his own experiences from that. Obviously, he's not a teenage girl, but there are definitely parallels in there, and you can tell that it's somebody who's been through this. And yeah, I just really, really love this book. There is something about that kind of discussion of mental health in here that I particularly love. It's my favourite of his books, and like I said, the Nerdfighter community in general is one of the online communities I've been a part of for a while now, and where I found friends. And this book in particular, when the release of it was happening, there was a lot of sort of puzzles and things, and a whole community that grew around the release of this book, and that's also why it's quite important to me as well. So a few different reasons really of why this one in particular, but there had to be a John Green book on here somewhere, I would say. I mean, I debated putting the Hank Green one on there as well, but I love Hank, but I love Hank more for his stuff sort of outside of writing, although I do really enjoy his book, whereas John's writing kind of is one that sticks with me a little bit more, I would say. One last one that I have definitely mentioned before, but not necessarily in too much detail, and then we have two kind of surprising ones. So the first one is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. So this, again, is probably the first Rainbow Rowell book I read, and I read this one at a very particular time that was just the right time for me to read this. So basically this tells the story of Kath, who is going to university, and she has a twin sister, and her sister decides that when they go to uni they're going to have separate rooms, and that kind of wants to live her own life a little bit. They've grown up in this fandom together, which is a Simon Snow fandom. It's very much based on another book that I will not talk about right now, but they've grown up in this fandom together. They both wrote fan fiction actually, and Ren is kind of wanting to move on from that, whereas Kath is still very much in that, and she's still very much kind of an introvert and just wanting to hide in her room with her fandom and not really fully experience the uni life and meeting new people and all of that, and just kind of growing up a little bit really. And I read this as I moved out to go to uni, so I can't remember if I read it like just before I went to uni or if it was just as I got there, but Kath is a very relatable character to me. Like the sort of panic and nervousness and the introvert side of her was very, very much something that I could relate to. And what I loved about this book is that it's not saying that she has to kind of branch out from that completely. It's sort of small ways that she kind of lets people in, and while still being very much herself. And I just really, really love this book, and like I said, found it particularly relatable at the time that I read it. So it's always going to be one that I'm going to love, because it's just going to remind me of sort of what my experiences of moving out and going to uni, which was some of my favourite times in life. So makes sense that I'm going to want to keep this book when it reminds me of those times. Okay, now we've got the two kind of wildcard ones. So I did have other books picked for this. I'll give you like a rundown of what I was thinking of. I was thinking maybe I should put some J. Kristoff on there because I've loved his writing recently, and then I thought, but have I loved them long enough to actually want them to be one of the 10 books that I keep, if I could only keep 10? I also considered some Lady Taylor, because Strange the Dreamer and Dosab are two of my all-time favourite books. I considered some classics. I thought either Pride and Prejudice or Great Gatsby, because they are my two favourite classics that I've reread many times. But then I thought, you know what? The books that I'm picking are kind of ones that have important meaning to me for various reasons, usually to do with the time that I read them and sort of the relationship that I had to them at the time. And I thought, you know what? There's two books that I need to put on here. One of them because childhood, which we'll get to in a minute. Then the other one is one that probably isn't the greatest book ever, but I just remember having one very particular reaction to finishing it, and I was just like, you know what, actually I would like to keep this book because of that reaction. And that book, very randomly, is On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher. So this tells the story of Evie Snow, who at the beginning of the book is an old woman who passes away, and she goes to kind of like the in-between this world and the afterlife place, and there's all these doors, and she goes to try and get through her door to go to whatever her afterlife is going to be, and she finds that she can't actually fit. Her soul is kind of too weighed down by other things and it won't fit through the door. So what she has to do is kind of revisit different parts of her life and different secrets and mistakes that she's made, and sort of unburden her soul so that she can move on. And it's a really beautiful book, in all fairness. I have only read it once, so I can't really say if I would still love it quite as much. But I just remember when I got to the last page of this, I just wanted to hug this book. Like, I just wanted to wrap it up and hold it tight and not let go. It just sort of hit me right, like, in the feels, pretty much. And I just really, really remember loving this book. And also it does sort of link back as well to my other love of theatre and things like that. I actually got this one signed at Stage Door for Les Mis, which is my favourite musical. So that's a lovely thing as well, that I went and got this one signed at Les Mis. But yeah, it's just because the only reason why this would be kept is just because, like I said, at the end of it, I just physically wanted to wrap the book up in a hug. I think I actually did just sort of sit with it like this for a while. And I don't have that sort of reaction at the end of books a lot, so it made sense to put it on this list. And then the last book I'm going to keep, like I said, is a childhood related one. So the book series that got me into reading, well, actually the books that probably got me into reading was something like Roald Dahl or something, and then I read like Sabrina the Teenage Witch books and Mary Kay and Ashley books. But the book series that really made me fall in love with reading is a book series that I don't talk about anymore, and I'm not going to put that on this list, although if you'd had asked me like 3 years ago I probably would have done. And that's kind of depressing, to be honest, that I can't put my favourite childhood book on this list because I have so many mixed emotions about it these days. But then I thought back and I'm like, is there any other like childhood books that I really, really loved? And I thought, actually, yes, there was. It's more in teenage years. So when I moved on from reading those, although I didn't really move on from them, but when that series has kind of stopped releasing near enough, I discovered other books that I liked. So it's kind of when I discovered my love of contemporary fiction, which you'll notice a lot of these books are contemporaries. And there was one particular author that I read everything that she put out. I read her teen stuff, I read her adult stuff, even though I was way too young to be reading it, and I bought everything that she released. And you know what, I would like to keep one of her books, and I'm picking my favourite from my favourite series. So the author is Meg Cabot, and the series is my favourite, is The Princess Diaries. My favourite book in that series is book number 3, which is over here called Third Time Lucky. I can't remember what it's called in America. It could be Princess in Love, something like that. It's always Princess in something. But basically, for anyone who doesn't know, although I'm sure you've all seen the film, this tells the story of Mia Thermopolis, who is growing up in New York City. In the books, actually, in the films it's San Francisco, but we forget about that. She's growing up in New York City. She's living with her mum, and she sees her dad sort of once a year or so, and then again, different to the film. In the film her dad dies, and that's how she finds it out. But in the books it's basically her dad finds out he has cancer, it's curable, but he can't have any more kids. So he has to go to his only daughter and tell her that she is actually the heir to this small little principality called Genovia, and it's about her becoming a princess and learning how to be a princess. Her grandmother gives her princess lessons, and it's just ridiculous and fluffy, and I love it. And there's 10 books in the series in total, although there has been an 11th at least since. I do have that one as well. I bought it when it came out a few years ago. It's called Royal Wedding. But yeah, I really, really loved the series growing up. It was my favourite series. Anything by Meg Cabot I would buy. And this one in particular, the reason I picked book 3 is that there is a romantic relationship that is growing for the first 2 books. It's sort of hinted at, and then this is the one where it all comes together. I think it was only ever supposed to be a trilogy actually originally, because this one actually does kind of wrap it up, and then they decided to release more, and then it got a little bit convoluted, and they split up the main pairing for a while, but it's okay. We got back on track eventually. But yeah, I've read every single one of these books. I've just had to like get this out of like a trunk that I have all my childhood books in, and good god, the amount of books I have by this author is ridiculous. But this is the one that I would pick. So this is my very random selection of books. If I could only pick 10 books, it is strange. There's a lot of contemporary on there though, so we're definitely sticking with the sort of contemporary reader me. I wonder if you ask me in a few years' time whether or not there'd be a lot more fantasy, considering that is kind of what I'm reading more and more these days, or whether or not I'm just going to suddenly find some more contemporaries that I love. But yeah, I don't know who to tag in this, because I honestly don't know who's done it and who hasn't and who would want to do it. But anybody that hasn't done it, consider yourself tagged. So that is everything. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. If you don't want to film a video and you just want to let me know what books you would pick, let me know down below. Let me know sort of your thoughts and feelings on some of the random ones that I picked today. But I will see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.